talking Japan and Disney with Joe Cheung on episode 24 of Checking In. Hello, I'm here today with Joe Cheung, a man who needs no introduction. Joe, we have just a little bit of your time, so I'm going to get right into it. Let's talk Japan. I just got back. Sam is planning to go. You're a big fan. What's your current status with Japan? You've been monitoring airfare, I'm sure, all the time like we do. What are you seeing?
Thanks for having me, Bob. It's great to be back. It's been too long. Yes, so Japan is like always, it's like perpetually on the list. My wife and I went pretty early on in our marriage, and then we went back. And so that first time we went, we climbed Mount Fuji, and this was right before I got into Miles and Point. So we did this all in cash, but we stayed in like a Japanese, Bob, I'm blanking. Like what's it called? Like it's a traditional Japanese inn type place. Like
onsen.
No, it's not an onsen. Onsen. I know that one. That's the,
ryokan.
Yes, ryokan. Thank you. Thank you.
I learned it all from you, Joe. I'm just parroting back what you told me.
We're just recycling our knowledge to each other.
There you go.
So we stayed in a Japanese ryokan and we hiked Mount Fuji, spent a few days in Tokyo, and that was, we'd only been married for like 1 or 2 years then. So we went back for a 10-year anniversary, went to Hokkaido, stayed in Sapporo, stayed at a onsen resort there where we actually, because it was our 10-year anniversary, sprung to have a private onsen. So we had an onsen right outside of our room. It was outside. That was great. So those are our 2 times in Japan, and we love it and really want to go back. And then add on to that the fact that my son is super into trains and knows that the Shinkansen, the bullet train in Japan, is a big deal. There's a lot of reasons why our family wants to go back to Japan. But to your first question, I checked. You just went over. We both live in New England. Our February break. I checked for next year's February break, and it looks like Japan Airlines is only releasing 2 business class seats per flight, which kind of sucks. They normally release 4, which is what you were able to snag for this year, 2023. But 2 is rough. I was ready to fly in premium economy and put the rest in business, but I don't know if I can do, just 2 business. It's tough. And that Boston to Tokyo flight's so nice.
It is. You really want to get that one. And no, I've seen for a long time too, and I've never gotten so lucky as being able to book 4 right out of the gate. And I think part of that has to do, if I ever have seen 4 seats on that flight, on any JAL flight far out, it's been on a non-Saturday, maybe even a non-Friday. Were you looking midweek or for those peach weekend departures to hit a school break?
Yeah, so it's interesting you say that. I ended up looking the week after and the week before, and there were 4 seats that whole time. But for our February break, I looked like all the way through Tuesday or Wednesday of February break. Maybe I'd pull our kids out for 1 or 2 days of school on the back end if we went to Japan for a week. And it was just 2 seats, at least on that Boston to Narita flight. So I guess Japan Airlines got wise. It's bloggers killing deals, Bob. This is your fault for going this year.
Well, no, we've looked at this and compared this for so long, and I think things have gotten materially worse. We just had a devaluation, yesterday with Alaska and how many miles that's going to cost if you can find the partner space. But you're trying to bring a family of 5, and so that gets, 2 is one thing, 4 is another, 5 is another thing altogether. So you've never gone there with the kids, it sounds like, though. It was kind of early in the marriage and an anniversary thing. You've never gone there with the kids, is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, we left our kids when we went for our anniversary, but we know that they'll love it. So I will say that on that Dreamliner that Japan Airlines flies from Boston, we could rough it in economy. It's only 11, 12-hour flight. It's not the worst thing. So, worst comes to worst. I mean, this is such literal first-class problems we're talking about here. But, I think Japan is worth it. And being able to have that direct flight, I think that really changed things, even for the Japanese tourist market here in Boston.
Yeah, no, definitely. And the flight was full. I mean, they're selling that one way or another, and the travel is back big time to Japan. What would you do if you took the kids for a week there? Would you stay in Tokyo mostly, go to Disney Sea? Would you go out into, you've visited other parts of Japan besides Tokyo. What would you do with them?
So we definitely go both to Tokyo Disney Sea, which my wife and I did on our 10-year anniversary, just that one park. But we'd also go back to Tokyo Disneyland. Funny, we were just talking at dinner last night, counting the number of theme parks Disney had, and my daughter has been to 9, and I've been to 10. But I'm still missing Tokyo Disneyland and Shanghai Disneyland, and so we would do that. But I also think, because a large motivation of that trip would be to ride the Shinkansen a bit. That first time my wife and I went, we got one of those JR passes, and it's more or less unlimited trips on the Shinkansen. So I remember we were staying in Kyoto, and we just took a day trip to Kobe, and there's a mall there with a really good Kobe beef steak place. So we just took a trip there. Did we talk about that place before?
I think at some point you mentioned how great Asian department store could be. And I was just talking to my wife last night about this incredible pork cutlet, tenkatsu, that we had at the Matsu. I think it's the same company that runs within the Japan Pavilion, the little department store there.
Mitsukoshi.
But these things are, yeah. So good. I mean, just like I didn't realize before the first time we went there, the restaurants on the grocery stores in the ground floor of these things, and then a bunch of retail, and then at the top there's restaurants. And I never knew there was restaurants on top. And these department stores in Asia, in Japan especially, are really incredible.
Yeah.
So was that the kind of place you went to there?
Yeah, it kind of was. I mean, it was a restaurant in a mall, and it was expensive. It was priced like a restaurant. Yeah, so we should. Yeah, if you ever visit Asia and you're listening to this, Hong Kong's the same way, Taiwan's the same way I can speak to, and I think my limited time in Beijing, it was the same way, and then obviously Japan is the same way. The department stores, like restaurants in a department store, which department stores kind of feel like mini malls in Asia.
Yeah, exactly.
The restaurants, you're not going to... And I am the foremost lover of TGI Fridays and Cheesecake Factory type places. So there's no shade at all. But when you go to the restaurants at these department stores / malls, it's not like that. They're like very nice restaurants. I remember I lived in Hong Kong for a couple of years when I was about 10. And I remember when we would go out for like fancy meals, we would have to go to like a mall or a department store type place. So don't sleep on that. And the other thing I'll say is, we all associate, or I, at least growing up in New Jersey, I associate food court malls with like hanging out with your friends and, waiting to go to the movies and things like that. The food courts in Asia, the food, it's a step above, I would say from, and again, no shade. I love Chick-fil-A, but I think, the food that you can get at food courts in Asian malls is pretty amazing.
It started this appreciation for the Japanese department stores just in the ground floor of the Tokyo station. Just walking from there, where we got off the train, the Narita Express, to our hotel, we thought this would just be like Penn Station, this kind of dodgy place that you want to scamper through as quickly as possible. But it took us a solid, 20 minutes because we were gawking and checking out so many of the, it's a different model. Like you say, a department store isn't like Macy's here or whatever the equivalent you would think of it as. The department store is almost like a mall in itself, and you go from having these retailers with little kiosks to having their own stores, and then it starts to feel very much like a mall. But there's brands that don't have here in the United States much of a presence as their own kind of like freestanding entity. So it's really pretty incredible. And some of the brands, like Tokyo Banana and Butter Butler, like these little confectionery treats that they have there, they're just, the branding is so on point, and the way they design, and it's kind of Disney-like, I think, the thought that they put into the font and the retail experience, the way it presents itself to a customer is really next level. I mean, I think America is pretty good at branding, but they take it to a whole nother level over there.
Hey, have you ever tried, have you ever tried like Japan's perfect fruit?
No.
Do you know what I'm talking about? So I think we first came upon it in Sapporo, which is in Hokkaido, which is the northern island. A lot of people go there to ski in the winter and things like that, although we did not when we went on our February break back in 2019. But what they will do is they will take fruit and just like take the most perfect, like imagine a strawberry, right? We pay $6 for a box of strawberries at Whole Foods or whatever. Actually, more than that these days. And, out of that entire box of strawberries, you maybe have one that looks like good, but like some are a little bruised and then they have like little funny shapes and things like that.
Sure.
Well,
Yeah.
in Japan, like what they will do is they will take like all the best looking strawberries and the ones that have like perfect shape, no bumps, no rough edges. And they'll put it in these like little plastic containers, and like 3 strawberries will be like $30. I kid you not. And so when we were,
I think strawberries were a very big thing, and seeing them in the department stores, in the grocery stores of department stores, it was more of a display like jewelry.
Yes.
than
Yes.
produce.
So some fruit will be displayed like jewelry. So of course you can buy like your regular box of strawberries. And so I remember we cheaped out. We didn't, I don't think we bought strawberries, but my wife bought like 2 slices of cantaloupe, or maybe it was honeydew. I can't remember. It was some kind of melon. And, and like, it's actually, I think they breed the fruit to be like sweeter too. So it's not just a presentation thing. It is a taste as well. Obviously, I think ultimately, we would not do that regularly, but it's like we were in Japan. They have this fruit on display, like as if it's like you said, as if it's jewelry. So, my wife decided to try some. I think that 2 slices of melon were like $10, which I'm just laughing thinking about it. But you gotta try new things when you're in other countries.
Absolutely. I appreciate your context there of other countries in Asia. Until you get on the ground there and you experience these different places, you really can't differentiate them. I think I asked you back in the day, should we go to Hong Kong first or Tokyo first? And you were saying, well, you've got the language is English in Hong Kong, so you might find that appealing, but Tokyo is very orderly, so you might like that appealing as well. And you just got to visit all these places to really be able to differentiate them. I was just talking with Sia Frost on a show that's dropping soon about Southeast Asia and all the different countries there. So you can't just look at the map or, take some, I found that a lot of people when we come back from Japan, they conflate a lot of different parts of Asia wrongly with Japan. It's like that. No, that's China. You're thinking of the wrong country altogether. So you really got to get over there and see these countries, don't you think?
Yeah, definitely agree. So, and I think we talked about this before. Hong Kong is probably the easiest for Westerners to go over to. People from the States or even from England and stuff like that, just because English is still readily spoken there, even after the reintegration into mainland China and things like that. My family is a little, I don't know, we're a little gun shy on going back to Hong Kong right now, just because we're not sure. I don't know. I always joke I might have to, delete my Twitter account before I go to Hong Kong, just in case. But and it's funny because my parents are there. They're there for the first time since the pandemic as well. But, Hong Kong is a lovely place. Spent 2.5 years growing up in there and still consider it home in many respects. So since things are open now, I think, all the quarantine and testing stuff is lifted. Actually, I saw China's done that this week as well. So Asia's pretty much open again. So I think it's time to get back for a lot of us.
Yeah. Well, I'm pleased to report Japan is still great. There's mask wearing going on. I think you hear that's been diminished even since we were there. So I think thankfully after a lot of years of not being able to tap into certain places of the country, of the world especially, things are back open and, a little diminished there. I maybe like to think of Japan or some other countries as having everything figured out, but they're straining with the same things that we are in terms of, employment. And it doesn't seem like inflation has hit as much over there. But one thing, maybe pivoting a little bit to Disney parks in our limited time here, Disney Sea was the most crowded Disney park I have ever seen. The lines there, the attractions there aren't groundbreaking, right? It's kind of like a recast Soarin', Toy Story Mania, Tower of Terror. They're not revolutionary rides that they have there. They're presented in a slightly different way. But when you see a 3-hour wait for a ride that, with a little Swift you can just walk on in Florida or California, it's like no way. So we just walked around there and left. We bought a weeknight evening pass, and it was so crowded it just didn't work out for us. So are you hearing that from other people? How Disney parks around the world are rebounding from the the maybe revenge travel that's now occurring in other parts of the world that we experienced maybe a year ago?
Yeah, I was definitely surprised by your experience at Tokyo Disney Sea, although obviously I don't follow Tokyo. That's like the one Disney park that I'm not able to book as a travel agent because they're owned by Oriental Land Company. I was surprised, but at the same time, we have seen in the domestic parks that it has been, as we are talking right now, this week is probably the busiest week of spring break. At least that's what Disney seems to have been anticipating. And because Genie Plus, which is their cut the line service, it fluctuates in price, and this week it's been at $29, which is the highest it has ever gone. And that's how high it was when we were there on February break. And so what I'm finding is that the crowds are pretty rough, and it can be pretty bad at times. But at the same time, I'm not sure if it's because people haven't been there for so long, or if, Disney just does such a good job. But the reality is I'm hearing very few, I guess the way to say it is people are like, oh, it was really crowded, but we had a great time. There's always starts with where it was really crowded, but it always ends with, but we had a great time. I mean, I had a friend from high school who wasn't my client. I was just helping her out. I didn't, she booked her trip before we reconnected. And she was just down there last week, and she the whole time, the whole time before she left, she was basically like, oh, I'm just doing this for my kids. I'm going to hate it, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, Bob, she comes back and she's been texting me nonstop, talking about Disney, asking if she can come on the podcast. She's they definitely won her over. And the funny thing is, she would text me and she's like, oh, we're going to Animal Kingdom now. And this is at 10 a.m. And then at 3 p.m. she'd be like, oh, that was a great day. And, for Disney people, going to a park for 5 hours is not a full day in the parks.
Yeah.
But I do think that a lot of the quote unquote normal guests are having a really good time, because just like in Japan, Disney does really care about service. And I think that is what has definitely started coming back much stronger. The service has improved, when the pandemic first, I guess not when Disney first reopened, but after a while, the level of service had dropped a little bit and people were complaining, but I think they're getting back to normal. There was a dip. It was high at the beginning because there was no guests, and then it dipped as they were getting used to it, and then now things seem back to normal again, which is awesome.
Well, there's some things I want to talk to you about being a Disney travel agent, but first of all, congratulations on succeeding so much in that. I see you collecting all kinds of awards. You've helped me personally. I want to, ask some questions kind of, behind the scenes on that. We'll save that for a separate podcast, quick episode that we'll record here and release on our paid channel. But here on the No Annual Fee, I want to talk kind of generally about how you advise clients that you're taking on. You do more, the way Disney travel agencies work. You book for a customer, Disney pays you a commission, and the customer doesn't pay any more for the services that you provide in terms of not just clicking the button and making the reservation, but consulting on where to stay, making maybe some Genie Plus reservations, doing dining reservations. I really want to hear about that in particular. You seem to have some magic there that I can't comprehend. But how do you approach this kind of customer, Joe? And it maybe is more general than just even Disney. You don't want to give them so many questions that they feel like they're not going to have a good time if they don't do all of these crazy things. And Disney is about as crazy and complicated as I've ever seen anything. I mean, the barriers to entry to having a good time there are seemingly very high. But if there's things that you don't know about the experience, then maybe it doesn't bother you that much. Maybe you could have done more, but you didn't know that you could do that more or you could do that better. So it doesn't really bother you. So like you say, people are like, it's crowded. We, went on enough rides to satisfy our experience, and we had some food and everyone was in a good mood. So it was a good experience. How do you advise a client that, in such a way that they have the best time possible without making them feel like they're going to have a bad time if they don't do all these crazy things that the real Disney experts do?
Yeah, while you were talking, it really feels analogous to, I'm sure, at this stage, when someone asks you for miles and points help, say a family member, I bet you 10 years ago, you probably dumped all this information on them. But now I'm guessing you don't go as hardcore.
No, it's so true, right? And that's a good outlet here for why we have podcasts. And so our spouses and friends don't. I mean, the classic thing that people will say is, oh, I had to start a blog because so many people were asking me about it. To that point, back in the day, maybe you were foaming at the mouth and excited about talking about all this stuff. Now if a family member says, and specifically this has come up with me recently, they're asking, oh, we're going to Disney. We have no clue what we're doing. I hear you go a lot. And I was like, well, that's just, I don't know where to begin with them, Joe, right? Like, I don't want to say, you got to go make these dining reservations. Oh, it's too late for that already. You got to get your park reservations. Oh, you got to get Genie Plus. You got to, I don't know where to find that right point between so crazy and nothing at all.
Well, first of all, send them to me. I'll take care of them. But so, what I really try to do, and this is something that I've learned is, and also something that just practically needed to happen, is I really try to meet clients where they are. There's a range of clients. Like if you contacted me because you were going to Disneyland or whatever, you already knew what you wanted to do at Disneyland. And so you just needed help with X, Y, or Z. Happy to do that. But then there are clients who will contact me, and this is where the analog to Miles and Points people might be, your, I don't know, brother's sister-in-law might be like, hey, I have 200,000 Ultimate Rewards points and I really want to go to Europe. How do I get there or whatever? And that's similar to clients being like, hey, we want to go to Disney World for the first time. Where do we go? So generally, like, I will tell people only what they need to know at a certain given point in time. And the very nice thing, I don't know if Disney did this on purpose, but Disney kind of drip feeds what you need to know because there's a timing to things, right? You book your hotel and your park tickets, then you book your park reservations, then you probably book your plane tickets, then you book your dining reservations, and then finally you start thinking about Genie Plus and stuff like that. Well, that all happens over the course of like months. And so I found that, you ease people into it. And after you have the first few conversations, you can kind of tell whether people really want to get in there and get deep. And then, you just direct them to podcasts and blogs so that they can start researching for themselves. Or if they just want to know, maybe ride these 3 rides and eat at this place and call it a day. So it really comes to feeling out, what the client wants to do and what they want to know about.
Yeah. One thing I saw in planning things to do in Japan was that if you're working with somebody over there, a tour guide, a friend, anybody who's been there that has some recommendation, you really know you're getting good service when they're asking questions of you, not just throwing recommendations at you. Because you could say, oh, what's the best restaurant at down at Disney World? And you say, oh, Victoria and Albert's. That's the best place. And they're like, what? No, this place is so expensive. We don't want to get dressed up. There's no kids. It's like tailoring the recommendations is super important. So if you're getting advice from somebody and they're not asking you questions about your preferences, I think that's a red flag. But how do you handle that? How can you possibly service all these clients and their individual preferences, going back with them asynchronously? And how do you handle all that?
Yeah. So, I mean, with Disney, it's like you say, what's your budget? And I'm always very... in fact, it shocks me how much people are actually willing to spend, because I'm always very much like, this is gonna, you better sit down before you look at this quote. It's gonna be pretty crazy. But, I found that, and I guess this is something I learned being a travel agent. I found that people's budgets are just different. For when we first started doing this, spending over $2,000 at Disney, which was realistic at the time, that was just oh yeah, that's our cap. But people will contact me and they are ready to spend, $10,000. And so you kind of just don't know what people are willing to do. So I try to give people a range of options. So unless people are asking for specific hotels, I will give them something in the value, moderate, or deluxe level. And then they pick, then it's very easy to see without having to be like, hey, Bob, what's your budget? If I show you the prices for value, moderate, and deluxe, you'll tell me which ones you're interested in. And then I'll just by default know. And, no one needs to be embarrassed about, no one likes talking about money. It's America.
I'm sure you've gotten pretty deep in there, but no, that's a good some good guidance on how it actually works in practice. And I think you probably get a idea once somebody says, what hotel level they're looking at, then maybe you have an idea of what dining options they'd like or ground transportation. Some people, it's really a once in a lifetime thing. So $10,000, and that's a number I've heard from friends anecdotally as well. It seems bonkers to me to kind of just lay that all out there for any given trip. But I think people, if they're going to go down there for a week and it's going to be the one time they do it when kids are growing up, they're willing to throw some money at it. It's a different equation depending on how often you go down there and what your economic strata is.
Yeah, and when you mentioned the ground transportation, like I think what has really helped being super steeped in Disney stuff is that when I find out from clients what they're looking for, like, are they looking for convenience? Are they looking for the best value? Are they looking to hang out at the hotel for like a large portion of their trip? Having been to Disney so much the last 4 or 5 years, and also just constantly, drinking Disney info as if I'm drinking from a fire hose, I think that gives me the ability to, make a decently confident recommendation that, these are the hotels that I think might work for what you're talking about. It's funny. I was talking to my wife just the other day. I can't remember, I was telling her about an issue that I had that she didn't know about that happened like a year ago. And she's like, how do you like view your clients' experiences? Or maybe she wasn't saying that, but what I was sharing with her was I always end up feeling like a personal stake in the client's trip going well. I don't think that's actually healthy, but that's how I feel. And so, especially when it's, I remember what I was telling her. Sometimes clients will be like, hey, I want to stay at this resort. And in my head, I'm like, I don't love that resort. But if clients say that, then I don't feel any pressure for them to like it or not like it. But if I'm like,
right, don't yuck their yum, right? I mean, if they like that place for some nostalgic reason or something like that, don't get in the way.
But when I have a client who's like, I don't know where I want to stay, and I'm like, these are my 3 recommendations, and then they pick one of those recommendations, then all of a sudden I feel pressure. Like if things go badly, it's like, did I let them down? Although, of course, like I said, it's not healthy because not everything is, experiences are different. Like it could have poured the whole entire time and that totally changes things. But, that's just kind of, I guess, my personality.
Well, is there any opportunity for you as a Disney travel agent to help them with some kind of make good after their trip? Say they come back and they don't say anything about their trip, and you say, "Did you have a good time?" They'll say, "Well, actually, all the rides were broken and the lines were long, and we had a terrible time." I mean, is there anything that you've ever done to kind of referee or negotiate on their behalf with Disney? I mean, do you have any leverage as a Disney travel agent? I guess is what I'm asking.
I think the leverage is Disney provided. Disney wants lifelong customers. I think that is what they're good at. Like that is my friend who went last week, like they succeeded. She was like, I fully intended on never coming back. Like she was planning for this to be her one trip with her kids. But now she's like, no, I think I want to go back sometime when they're older, right? So this is what Disney is in the business of doing. So they're very good at doing make goods. So my role as a travel agent sometimes is just to be that person, like I don't love, it's funny. Did you see that article about fake personal assistants?
Maybe. Tell me more about it.
Basically, if you have a personal assistant, life is easier because you don't have to interface with brands or whoever. Like you don't have to interface with hotels. You don't have to complain about things. Your personal assistant can do it. But then people make fake personal assistants and it's just as effective. Because, they look like they have more clout. This person has a personal assistant. They must,
now that you describe it, I think I saw Adam, Travel Fanboy, tweeting about that probably, right?
He tweeted about it because I tweeted him about it. I was like, he was ahead of the curve 6 years ago.
There you go.
Quote unquote personal assistant. But I bring this up to say that sometimes it's hard for people to be like, hey, this went badly, Disney. Is there anything you can do? Well, as a travel agent, I can do that for them. And, moving into our final topic, I had a client who sailed Disney Concierge on the Wonder, completely loved it, but there was an issue with their stateroom and they had booked a 1-bedroom concierge stateroom. So Disney gave them a veranda stateroom to use and they used that one instead. But they were like, hey, we paid for a 1-bedroom. We were staying in a veranda the whole entire time. And so I helped them interface with Disney for a make good, and Disney was able to compensate them in a way for that. And so they didn't have to worry about, I called Disney for them, I emailed Disney for them, so they didn't end up having to worry about that. And so, and there was just another person advocating on their behalf. They also did some contacting of Disney too. So those are the types of things that I can do sometimes if things go badly.
That's a great example. And I was going to ask on your cruise. So Disney Concierge was one of the favorite vacations I ever took with our kids. I mean, it was just fantastic. I wrote about it on Lux Recess. Robin's been on the show a bunch of times. The three of us get together, me, you, Joe, and Robin, kind of the Boston contingent of these things. I had a great time on that cruise. You did it for the first time concierge level on the Disney Dream. I was listening to you quiz Leslie on which ship you went on. I was right along there with you. That's the same one we did concierge on. Did you stay in a one bedroom or a veranda? And just to be clear, that's like the one bedroom is like twice as big as the standard room, right? Yeah,
we stayed in a one bedroom, and it was really nice. The whole experience.
Nice.
You joke about people dropping $10K on a vacation, but
that's a
no comment.
Yearly similar number, I bet.
No comment here. But
this was only a 4-night cruise, right?
It was a 4-night cruise, and we paired it with a Disney World stay in the beginning. I was Leslie and I recorded our kind of is Disney Cruise Line Concierge worth it episode. That'll be coming out soon. These things are never worth it if you just add up the numbers. Like, boarding and getting off was easy. There was some alcohol. They gave us popcorn. We had a nicer room. We had a club lounge to use. But none of those things will add up to, I calculated that I paid about 50% more than I had been willing to pay to do the cruise in general. Like, none of that's going to add up to that 50%. But there's something to be said. And, I don't know if it's because I'm getting older or whatever, but just enjoying things a little more. And the phrase you used, Bob, when we were talking about it before I left was, just staying above the fray. I do find that to be very valuable. And it's kind of like you can't put a price tag on that. It's scary, but, I'm starting to understand why people spend $5,000 on a business class flight instead of using points. You know what I mean? My in-laws, they had to go back to Taiwan, and they are getting older. So they ended up springing for paid cash business class flights, which is something I never thought I'd see them do, but they needed it to actually be able to make the trip. So you kind of see how as you get older, your back starts hurting more. You want to just enjoy things and not stress about things as much. And that Disney Cruise Line Concierge really helped me to do that, and the family.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, so much to touch on there, but people should absolutely, if I haven't mentioned it before, listen to your Disney Deciphered podcast with Leslie. Fantastic, kind of targeted at entry level, but you keep your finger on the tabs of what's going on, what's new, so even people who are seasoned there really enjoy that. Nice bite-sized, but in-depth enough to be very interesting and helpful. Disney Deciphered with Joe and Leslie. So check that out. I think we need to pivot over to the paid show now because our time is limited. Anything else you want to mention here? Any other things that you're working on? We're going to talk about that more in a minute, but anything else you want to give a shout out to right now?
Yeah, so Disney Deciphered, I'm still a producer on the Miles to Memories podcast, so I'm on there every once in a while. And yeah, if you're looking to book a Disney vacation, this is the thing I always say. Miles and points people, you cannot pay for your Disney vacation with points. So if you're going to pay cash anyway and you need some help, feel free to reach out josephcheung at travelmation, that's with an M.net, and I'm happy to help you out. The really only good way to save on Disney vacation is to get Disney gift cards at a discounted rate. And so that's where you're going to get your most savings. But I can help you, working with me, you can pay with all of those that you want. I've had, clients. And it's funny, clients from the miles and points space, they'll be like, can I pay with 7 different gift cards? And I'm like, yeah, no problem.
That's nothing.
Yeah, that's just combine them into increments of 1,000. But other than that, I got you. No problem.
I love it. Thanks for your time, Joe. You have been listening to Checking In with Robert Dwyer on the Milenomics Podcast Network.